Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we're going to look at bean validation. Bean validation is the de facto standard for validating your application's logic, and it works very well with Spring and Spring Boot. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you how to effectively implement bean validation within your application. By the end of this video, you have a solid understanding of bean validation and how to effectively implement it within your Spring Boot projects. If you're new to this channel, I ask you to subscribe, like this video, share with your friends. So without further ado, let's jump right in the video. So to get started, I have here a Spring Boot application that I've initialized using this configuration. I came over to this website, start.spring.io, and then I set it up with the following configurations. So if you look at the dependency session, I'm using just 3 simple dependencies: Spring Web, Lombok to reduce my boilerplates, and I also added the bean validation, the Hibernate version, the implementation of the bean validation specification done by Hibernate, and it is the most popular one. And also, if you are using Spring Web, there's really no need to add this, but I added it to be explicit so that you know that this is the dependency that is responsible for handling the validation of your beans. So I have already opened the project in IntelliJ, so I will just go to my IntelliJ, and here I have created a few packages. So I will just close these ones like so and then show you what I've done. So basically I've created these packages: DTO, entities, repository, service, web, just as usual to keep things organized. And also in here I've changed this application.properties to application.yml or .yaml, and inside of it, nothing big, just set the port number and then set the application name. I'm not even using any type of database for this demo, so there's no need to have the data JDBC or Spring Data JPA. I'm just going to be focusing on validating our DTOs. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to get your DTOs in correctly. So the first DTO I have here is called customer request, and it's a Java record. It has these properties: the name, email, phone number, and address. They're simple, straightforward, and this customer request DTO, I'm using it inside of my customer controller, and my customer controller is just a simple RESTful controller, and is annotated with the require ask constructor to allow me to do dependency injections easily. And yeah, I have one endpoint in this, and it's a post mapping endpoint. And what I'm doing here basically is I'm grabbing a customer request, a request to create new customer, and then I'm passing that request over to my customer service here, which is this interface. And this interface has one method, add customer, and then it's taken in as an argument the customer request DTO. So I've also implemented this interface with this class customer service implementation that I've annotated with that service, and this is the method that I'm implementing, add customer. So basically I'm grabbing the customer request as an argument, and then going ahead and saving it to my database, doing some processing, all those things that you need to do to a customer, and then you do it. But for this simple demo, what I'm doing is I'm just returning the same customer that we receive and sending it back as a response. So the response will come back to our controller, and it will be returned back to our caller. Okay, so this is the application that we're going to use to practice validating beans or our application business logic. So let's test this application now and see if it is running. So I want to click here and run. And everything seems to be running correctly. Our application started correctly on port 9191 as we configure within our application.yaml file right here. So the application is running correctly. And now if we try to test some endpoints, just one endpoint by the way, the slash customer endpoint, and send some data, we should get the data that we send back to us. So let's test that. Okay, so now to test this application, we have set up an endpoint here, customers, on this domain, localhost 9191, and it's a post request. So this post request is sending in this payload, okay? The name, the email, phone number, and address. So when I send this, I should receive a response of the same object because that's the logic we wrote in our application. Okay, we assume that it's going to be storing some type of data store for us, but we're just returning it. But the purpose of this whole video is to highlight a very important thing in building backend application. Imagine that your front-end developers will do all that kind of validation. They will try to make sure that the user send the correct data that is required. But in the case a hacker or some you know play hacker or somebody try to mess with your application, you know and even the users can try to play with your application in some sense. So you need to have some sort of validation within the application that will check to make sure that the actual data that is expected is the one that is being sent. So in the case where, for example, if I send, instead of sending the name, I could send something else. I could send like an empty string, like so. Instead of sending the actual name, I send no name. Instead of sending email, I send something like this, you know. And instead of sending phone number, I could send another data type. So now if I send this request, it will still work. So this will be stored in our database, and this is inconsistent with our application. We don't want the person name to be empty. We don't want the person email to be a website. It should be an email. So the way we can tell our application how to scrutinize this type of information I receive, and process is by using the bean validation. So now let's go ahead and add some bean validation to our application so that we can solve this problem. Very basically, bean validation works by defining constraints to the fields of a class by annotating them with certain annotations. The most common validation annotations are the ones you see on the screen, and we'll try to use some of them within our application. But before we do that, let's quickly run through them so that you understand. So the at not null annotation, just as the description says, it checks for nulls within a field. So if the field has no value, it's null, this annotation will detect that and throw an exception. Similarly, when you send in a field, or a list that is empty, that is a field that has a list, and that list has no objects in it, it will also be detected when you place this annotation above that field, and it will throw an exception. The list is empty. The same thing for not blank. Not blank works for a string, and the way it does it is it checks if the string has some value in it or no value. So it will check to know if there's a character in something in the string or there's no character at all. So like if you can remember from the example before, we sent an empty string with no characters and it passed. But if I had this annotation above the field in my DTO, it would have been detected and an exception would have been thrown. The next ones is the admin and the admax annotations. These ones are there to validate numerical fields, make sure that the value that you place in that field is uh, in the range specified, that is not more than the max and it's not less than the minimum. The next one is add pattern. This is very important, and it checks to match a string field with certain regular expressions. So it checks to know what of the string that you write in that field is following certain pattern. and this is really useful. Next is the email. This email is clear. It's check there to make sure that the value you send is an email. So you cannot send a website, a regular string, or maybe some numbers. It will throw an exception. It will express an email. So the text you put in the field annotated with this should conform to the format of an email. So now let's try to use some of these annotations within our project. So to start our validation, we will firstly open up our project photo structure and find our DTO, okay? Because this is the object that is carrying the attributes that we want to validate against. So now in this DTO, let me close this like so, and where can I minimize this one? Yeah, okay. Now we have some room. We will try to add some validation to these fields, all right? So for example, the name, I want this name to be not nor, like so, and also it should be not nor. You can do it like so, and then inside of this parenthesis you can pass in the message. So let's say the message I want to send here is that name, let me just say customer name cannot be no, something like this, okay? And next I want to also check to make sure that it is not blank, not blank. So say customer name must not be empty, okay? So why, let me input this, and it's coming from Jakarta validation constraints, okay? Now we're good. So not null and not blank will make sure that this string has a value and the value is not empty, okay? So let's come here to the email, and the email, if you guessed it right, is at email. Now this annotation will make sure that this value in here is an email. If it is something other than an email, an exception will be thrown. So here we can say something like, please provide a valid email address. Shout out to tab 9 for that code completion. And let's say we also want to make sure that the phone number is not null. So I would say message, please, not please, but phone number must not be null, something like this. And here I will use the at not blank, and the message will be, please provide not this one, customer address must not be empty, something like this. So now with this validation, our application will first of all make sure that these attributes or properties conform to the constraints that we set upon them. So I did not null here and not blank here intentionally so that I can show you their differences when we test the application, okay? So let's go ahead and test our application. So I'm going to move out to our customer controller here, and where we are getting in this payload is here in the request body. So I'm going to add the annotation here at valid, like so, and this annotation will do the validation for us. So it will look in this object, this class, and find all the constraints that we set and make sure that the values that are passed in this object conform to these constraints. So in our constructor, this at valid is used to do the validation for us. If we are doing it on the class level, we use the at validated annotation, but we are doing it at the field level, so we use at valid. So now let's test our application again. So I'm going to run it, and we will wait for it to start, and it starts correctly. So now I'm going to switch over to Postman, and in Postman, remember we have here a name that is empty. We have here an email that is not an email, instead it's a website, and here we have our phone number, we have our address. So let's send this and see what we get back. So now that we send this, we get a 400 bad requests because we did not send the correct data. The values we sent here does not conform to what we have specified within our DTO. So let's now send in some correct values and see what we get next. So for name, I'm gonna put in John Doe, and for email, I'll put John Doe at ondev.io. Now when I send this, it's working correctly. So you see that we have implemented validation within our stuff and it's working. So now let's test the other two conditions. This last one, the address cannot be blank, and this phone number cannot be null. So let's go ahead and remove the address and make it blank and send this request. We'll have a bad request. Okay, so now let's put null and send it. We'll still have a bad request. You see, so when you have this annotation here at not blank, it will check for both null and also check for empty strings. Okay, so now let's test for the phone number as well. The phone number will say that it cannot be null, so let me make it a blank first to see if it works. And I have to correct this and put some address here, Rabat, Morocco, and I will send in this, and it works. It is blank, but it is not null. So you understand it now, right? So now let's try to make it null and see if it will pass. Now it is null, and if I send it, it should fail. The constraint is being validated correctly. So now one more thing I want to point out here before we finish this video is the type of exception that is being thrown. By the way, if you have not yet seen my video on handling exceptions, I will link it in the description, so please check it out. It's really interesting. We will now try to handle these exceptions so that it don't come back to us like this, because this gave us no clue, no context, nothing. So we will, in the next piece or next part, I will show you how to handle this exception such that you can have a response that is understandable and tell you exactly what went wrong so that you can fix it. So let's go ahead and do that. In order to add exception handling to this project, I will create a new package in this folder, and I'll call this package exceptions. And inside of this exception package, I will do all the exception handlings. By the way, if you have not yet seen my video on handling exceptions in the Spring Boot application, I highly recommend you check it out. I have the link in the description of this video. So I'm going to create a class in this exception package, and I'll call this one global, or just call it default exception handler, like so. And then I'll annotate this class with the REST controller advice annotation. And now inside of this, I can perform some exception handling. So I'll create a method, so it's going to be a public method, and I will return just a simple map of string keys and string values. Okay, so I'm going to call this we'll call it just handle validation exception, something like this. Okay, And the type of exception that it will take as an argument will be the method argument not valid exception. So it's going to be um, ex. I'll just cut it short. This is the type of exception that it will take as an argument. And let me import this map like so. Now inside of this method, I'll create a variable that will hold all of my errors. So call it errors, and then I will need to get the errors, right? So to get the errors, I'll firstly put this errors is gonna be a map that will host all the errors that may happen, okay, or the exception that may happen. So it's gonna be a new hash map like so. And now what I can do next is to um, grab from my exception. Let me close this so that we can have room. This exception object here, I'm going to get the bindings, and this binding result will allow me to get all the errors with this method. So now that I have all the errors, I will loop through them using the for each method, and for each error, so I'm going to grab each error like so. I'm going to perform some operation. So for each error, I will grab the field name of that error like so. And the way I get the field name is by calling the error like so, error dot get field name, okay. But this error does not have this method, so the only way to get this method is to cast this error to another object called field error. So the way to do that is I'm going to perform some casting here. So I just put parentheses around error like so, and then inside here I will perform the cast. So I'm going to cast it to a type called field error. So now I can grab this get field not field name but get field from here. So this will return to us a string that will be the field name, okay, the field name that through that exception. So now the next thing I need to get also is the error message as well. I need to have the error message like so. And to get the error message is straightforward. I will just do error dot get message, and then I will um, let me get the default message, get default message like so. This will work. So now that we have the field name, we have the error message, the next thing to do is to put it inside the map. So now I will put the error inside this errors map. I will just do errors dot put, and then the field name will be the key, and then the error message will be the value. So that's it. And after everything, I will just return the errors because it's a hash map, so I'll return it back. So this will be the method that will handle this type of exception when it is thrown. Method argument not valid exception, because that's the exception that will be thrown when we pass an invalid argument to our controller. Now to complete this, I firstly need to annotate this method with the exception handler annotation, and I need to tell it which exception it should listen for. So the exception is method not valid annotation like so. So whenever this exception is thrown, this will be the method that will handle it, and then it will do this processing and return to us the errors in a really organized form. And another thing I also want to add here is the response status annotation. Now this response status annotation will give us a unique HTTP status code that we can work with, that will give us an idea of the type of error that happened. So in this case, it's going to be the HTTP status let me HTTP status dot bad request, okay, because the request that you send is not valid. That's why the exception is thrown, so it's a bad request. So this will be the status quo. And this starter code is 400. As you can see here, is bad request. So we have everything that we need to have exception handling within this project. So now I will save this and start the application and test it out. Okay, so now our application is running correctly. I will switch to Postman so that we can perform some tests. Here we have the same endpoint as before, and we have this payload that has some validation errors. So we will try to submit this request, and let's see how the application will respond. So I'm going to click send, and voila, as you can see here, we got a proper error message outlining all the fields that had problem, and you can see here we have a 400 bad request error. So before we're just getting that error that did not give us any information of what is happening, what went wrong, and which field we did not submit correctly. So now we have this error message that's giving us detail of all the fields, and then the error messages are printed here as well. So you can know that this phone number, must not be null, so you can fix it. Now you can put in some phone number like so, and if you send this request again, now you'll see that the phone number error is no longer there because we corrected it. Similarly, if we add a name here now, instead of it being empty like John Doe, and send it, you'll see that that other exception, that error is gone as well. So the only error that we have now here is email. So email is not in the proper format, so we need to fix that as well. So now I'm going to do something like John Doe and then add endeavor.io. With this, we'll be able to fix that. So when I send it, now we have our correct data because we have no validation error. So when you have one validation problem, that entire thing will not work. It will tell you that you have a problem, you need to fix it before you send that request again. So now everything is working fine with validation and exception handling to give us the errors correctly. So that's all you need to know to work with validation and in your Spring Boot project. I hope this video gave you some value, and if it does, consider smashing that like button. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching all the way up to the end. I hope you found some value in this video. If you do, please share it with others so that they may learn a thing or two as well. Thank you again for watching. Smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. See you next time. Bye bye.